Welcome to the new year, innovative teachers. We are so excited for what 2021 is going to bring us, and we have so many fun things planned for you all this year. We know that January, you often want to reorganize and try something new. So that's why in this episode, we are talking about how to plan and use the standards meaningfully in your STEM lessons. Also, if you're already loving our podcast, make sure to subscribe, rate, and review. This helps spread the word to other innovative teachers who would love to connect to us in this new year. Stay tuned for a great episode full of useful information. We can't wait to learn and grow with you. Well, welcome to the new year, Spencer. This is so
Right.
exciting.
It is. And 2021, hopefully 2021 is different than 2020, I guess. But at the same time, I feel like 2020 is pretty good. We got to start this podcast.
Yeah,
So,
we did start this podcast. We still haven't met
yeah,
in
I know. So
real
that's
life.
true. That's true.
Maybe that's with 2021. Your wife
Mhm.
and you and me and my boyfriend, we can meet
Yeah,
up, and
that's right. It almost has to be in 2021, I would say.
we would have to record a podcast, I think, if we met up in person.
We would. We would. And the video would look different. So everyone would be like, what? And the
Yeah.
audio probably a little bit different, even.
Yeah, well. Well, this topic we're really excited about. We've gotten a lot of questions over the past few months of how to purposely plan your STEM lessons and ways that you can integrate your standards and just be really mindful of that. So we're going to share our tips with that with everybody. So
Mhm.
hopefully you can find something that connects with you. So I don't know, when I got into this STEM position, I think like you, there really wasn't anything out there like it's specific enough for K through 5. So we've kind of had to create our own stuff from scratch, which is
Yeah, you're exactly right.
a lot of work. And I think a lot of teachers are in that same position as well, or they don't know
Mhm.
where to start. When I got into the STEM position, I actually didn't jump to the standards quite yet, which I know is a little backwards or maybe not the best practice. But I came into this room and all of my things were in boxes and I had a brand new room remodel. And so I had to know what I had to work with. So what I did first is just see what materials that I had on hand and I organized everything into units. So I was just creating my own units. And then from there, I looked at the standards. So some units that I thought of like big picture was robotics, those basic things, hands-on
Mm.
activities, video making. So kind of those big picture ideas. And then I looked at the standards the next step, which might seem a little backwards, like I said. But I know, like with classroom teachers, you kind of are in the same way. Like you have those big units, like fractions, energy, like you have those big units anyway, and then you break it down into the standards. So that's how I approached it.
Mhm.
And then I would look at the standards. For us, it's Colorado state standards, which has connections to Common Core and Next Generation Science, but not 100%. There's obviously our own things. So then I went through and found standards that would work for STEM, which I know we'll talk about more, how to choose which standards. But I literally went through and highlighted digitally which standards I was going to use for each grade. So I kind of had a progression and not always doing the same thing with everybody. So that's how I approached it with those standards. Also, I know you'll say too, but looking at those key words is super important. And you don't
Mhm.
necessarily have to teach everything in that section. I know, like, I know you're like, oh, I need to teach all the energy standards with this STEM lesson. Um, but not all of them, I do feel like have to be specifically a STEM lesson that you're going to assess with that standard. So I would pick maybe one or two to really focus in on with that hands-on activity. But that's how I approached it with my classroom, just thinking of as a unit, then what standards would apply, and then going through and really breaking down those lesson plans so we can reach that goal and knowing what I also want to accomplish STEM related. So that's kind of an overview of what I do. I've gotten better over the years. Talking to other classroom teachers is really, really helpful. Like even when you're in a classroom teacher, like talking to the other grade levels or other people who are in your same grade at other schools can really help too. What would work well for a STEM type of unit. So that's how I've approached it. Do you kind of do something similar, add in other things or?
That's what I was gonna like. I liked how you went like, and you kind of did the full thing because I was gonna say something in between, but then you finished. And one thing like I noticed too that what you said is like a lot of times classroom teachers they have access to like innovation labs is what I thought
Mhm.
of and the way you were doing it is perfect for that because they have to rent out things. Like I know I've spoke at schools where they're like, hey, can you help? Like, because I'll help different people in Indiana set up like STEM programs, or they'll ask me, my 2 cents or something and just call me. And the one school said, we have all this stuff. We spent all this money. The teachers don't use it because they didn't go about it that way. Like they didn't know what to, you know, when to check it out, what to check it out for, how to break it up. So I think that's a really good way to approach it, especially for classroom teachers. For
Mhm.
me, I just did things a little bit different and it works well for me. And I think, like you said, and we say on here all the time, there's more than one way to do things
Yes.
all the time. And I like the way you did it because I could see like me doing that in the future for definitely for like some of the grades, especially
Mhm.
because I kind of like it's almost like reverse what you normally would think.
Yeah.
And I feel like you can cover a lot of things that way. And like too, I like how you said, this project you thought would cover all these energy standards. Well, maybe it didn't. Maybe it covered two of them. And the
Mhm.
way it covered them, maybe that was really good for that standard. And maybe you want to do something else that's not STEM related or a variation of STEM like makerspace or I don't know, computer science or something and integrate something like that. So
Yeah, for sure. Because not every standard has to be STEM. Like,
exactly.
it shouldn't be actually.
Mhm. And
Um,
that's the hardest part because like we teach STEM and a lot of times, we got to teach background information first or like that'd be like the define the problem day for me. And, sometimes I think there's like we've talked about before, there's a time for discovery and venturing off in STEM. And there's a time for, hey, I got to learn this information. It's just like any other job. You got to get trained a little bit before you
yep.
venture off and do
Yeah.
different things.
Or
So
sometimes even it's like that tech skill, you have to teach them that first.
yeah, and I
Right?
think that's super important to talk about for sure because that's not something people think about in STEM. But yeah, because
Mhm.
otherwise, if you don't know how to use it, what's the
Yeah.
point?
Well, that
You
was
know?
like my whole first year for sure. Like we obviously did STEM, but the
Uh-huh.
projects like were very, very simple. Like what I'm doing now is way different than what I was doing 3 years ago because they needed to, like you said, build up those skills to be able to do like bigger things. So
Yeah.
I mean, that's nice. We get to see the same group of kids year after year, but even as a classroom teacher, you're like, I'm getting started. They don't know how to do anything. Well, you can build up to it and you have them
Hmm.
all day, all year, which is amazing.
Right.
I miss
Exactly.
that, but so what do you do with your class with your standards?
So the way I've kind of always approached standards, and I like to try to like simplify things for myself because I'm the kind of person I like overcomplicate something, and I'll make it a lot harder on myself than I need to.
Hmm.
So like I think especially the standards here in Indiana and next gen and everyone, I just feel like when they write the standards, they add so much fluff. And if you're listening to this, I should say don't take offense, but I kind of hope you do a little bit because I feel like I feel like they need to be better. And I always say that, but then at the same time, I wouldn't want that to be my job. But at the same time, I think it would be cool, but it would be a lot of pressure because when I read them, I see a lot of fluff.
Hmm.
And I like to remove the fluff, is what I always say. So when I look at it, first thing I do is I look at different standards. And when I'm looking at the standard, like here's an example of one from Indiana. It says characterize materials as solid, liquid, or gas and investigate their properties, record observations, and explain the choices to others. So that I feel like is a lot to teach, but really when I read it, I just hear investigate their properties,
Yeah.
explain to others. So
Yeah.
that's what I'm focusing on. Whereas, a classroom teacher might concentrate on the characteristics of solids, liquids, and gases,
Yep.
and kind of concentrate on that basic knowledge. And if they don't, and I go and ask them that, I might say, hey, here's a video about what a solid, liquid, and gas are. Here, let's organize them real quick. And then we start to investigate because we got that background information. So I kind of break it up into like different parts because I feel like when you look at a standard, everyone kind of gets overwhelmed and thinks, oh, I got to do this, 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 and this. And even if you're a classroom teacher, just chill out, like break it up, figure out what's important for your students to know, what you want them to be able to master by the end, and concentrate on that one thing. And most of the time, I think too, and I think this is why that standards have a lot of fluff. When kids go to investigate, properties of matter, like in this example, they're already going to tell others about it
Mhm.
because you're doing a hands-on project. So I didn't even try to necessarily do that second part. It just happened organically. So a lot of times I feel like these things happen organically in standards, and that's why they probably go about them the way they do. I know in Indiana, I got invited to help write benchmarks or projects that were masteries of standards. So we would break up the standard and say, here's a project that's perfect for it. And a
Mhm.
lot of times too, like I would skip out the little stuff and they would say, why? And I would say, because they learned that as a result. It's just not shown
Yeah.
right away. And that's something too, like I love talking about with standards because I think it's so big for the kids.
Yeah.
It's just getting rid of like that fluff. And I think when we get rid of it as teachers, it's one of those things that makes more sense to us and we approach them just a little bit better than we normally would.
Mhm.
Um, and another thing I do is like a STEM teacher. So if you're a STEM teacher listening to this, or homeschool parents, I know a lot of times tell me they listen to it. I try to talk to other teachers or the teachers in my building to say like, hey, what are you teaching first? How are you going to organize like your standards? Like, are you going to do physical science first? Are you going to do earth science first? That way I kind of know if they have a basic knowledge before they come into my room. And I know a lot of parents too like to do like enrichment activities. So it's always kind of nice if you're a parent to know that kind of stuff too, which I know I've had like a couple parents tell me they really enjoyed listening to our show. So that's something you could think about too, is just being like, hey, how did you teach science? Do it like in a nice manner where they're like, oh, I teach this way, this, and then they're like, oh, and then kind of how you can build enrichment for your kids, which I think is always a great idea. And
Mhm.
really, when it comes down to those standards, like you kind of said, and I kind of said a little bit too, it's that turning that basic knowledge into application. That's what STEM is. I mean, we're taking basic knowledge that they know and we're seeing if they can apply it almost right away, which is a lot on kids, but they do phenomenal with it because they just learned it and it's fresh in their memory. And when something's application like that, you're like, I saw a stat one time, like you're 3 times more likely to remember
Oh,
it
sure.
later in life because you applied it. You know what I mean? It's kind of like it's that old saying, if you fish for someone, they'll have you fish for them the rest of your life. If you teach him how to fish, he'll be able to feed himself for the rest of his lifetime. I probably screwed that saying up. That's
No,
fine.
I
But
I get it.
it's something like that. But
Yeah.
like the basic premise is, when we have the kids do that, we have them do it for a reason. And breaking up the standards for STEM, I think calls for that looking for those, what I call wow words, like investigate,
Yep.
problem solve, observe, those kind of things is what we're looking for in those standards for sure. As far as like cross curriculum, I know we wanted to touch on this a little bit. So as far as cross curriculum, what would you say to everyone listening?
So with cross curricular, like I love planning cross curricular
I
lessons.
do too. I think it's
Um,
awesome.
I think it actually is a lot more helpful because you have this science standard and then you're like, well, now what do they do with it? So, could they read about it? Could they write about it? Like, what other ways? The biggest thing with cross curricular is that, um, and with standards in general, like, not, and we said this, like, not every standard w- is applicable to a STEM lesson, but some of those standards might be best suited for building the background information. So with one standard, maybe that's where they learn like the basics of it. And then the other standard is how you go deeper into it. But you could definitely read about it in reading. And so I know there's so many standards about nonfiction reading and being able to apply that information. So when I taught third grade, we had a big unit on rocks and minerals. So some of those standards are just like knowing the difference between the different types of rocks, how they're formed. But there's a lot of cool hands-on things you can do that also. But there's those reading standards too, like being able to apply and take notes digitally. So we would often read about it in reading using different types of resources like infographics. We would use a lot, different websites, ebooks, audiobooks, podcasts like Tumble Science. But we use that innovative and different ways of researching. So then when we got to the STEM activity we did during science, we could break it up. We built that background information that way. So we were able to cover some reading standards, but also prepare us for that STEM challenge, which was super beneficial. And the kids feel super confident because it all goes along together. And you don't have to do that for everything, but you can go so much deeper in a lot of ways when you are connecting those things across the day, and you're helping them make those connections. It's just another way to connect and even cover more standards. I think it's easier to plan when everything
Oh,
connects together. You're finding all of this cool stuff. I love lesson planning. I'm a weirdo, but I love lesson planning. But that way you can use all those cool resources you find in a different way. So
well, it's like a
that's
giant puzzle when it comes together like that too. I feel
yes.
like I've never been like I did do my student teaching in a regular classroom, and I tried to do like technology and STEM and different things when I was in there. And if it was like a full circle of a day where everything kind of went together, I feel like the kids do better too. So I feel like
Oh,
that's the other
yeah.
thing, like we can be using STEM or STEM principles, because it's like it comes like a full circle. Like it just makes sense.
Yeah, and then it also, I think it helps with the reading too, because they actually are understanding what they're reading. Like they can see it. They understand what those words mean. So they're really, and like it's just a cool way to bring like vocabulary to life. Like they're able to comprehend what they're reading because they're doing a hands-on
Hmm.
activity with it. So it's a win-win for everybody.
Hmm. And that's, I mean, you basically like hit on most things I was going to talk about, which is awesome because, I mean, that's what cross curriculum should be. I mean,
Mhm.
it should be, it flows really well throughout the day, the thing is too, and the only thing that I was going to say, and you basically said it too, is like STEM doesn't have to always be in STEM subjects. And I
No.
feel like we say that a lot, but it needs to be said a lot because people are like, well, like I know I've spoken at places for schools and they're like, well, I want to do it during my reading time. Do it during
Yeah,
your reading
do it
time.
during reading.
Like no one's gonna stop you. And it's always like, well, it stands for science, technology, engineering, and math. I'm like, yeah, but I know school in Indiana that got recognized nationally. I can't think of the school's name, but they did STEAM and the A was for agricultural.
Oh,
And
really?
they got people to donate land, and they had drones, and they did like data analysis on soil sample. Like they were like a top school across the nation for like agriculture,
Oh,
which
that's
I thought
awesome.
yeah, which I'm like, that's what it should be. Like, if you want to take STEM and add in an R, make it STERM. I don't know. Do
Oh, I
something. You could do
dream.
stream. See, you could do stream. You could do art and reading. And I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, you can use the principles. Like, I feel like
Mhm.
people look at STEM as like science, technology, engineering, math. Yes, it is.
Yeah,
But those principles and how you teach could be applied in any subject.
totally. And if you
And
are in the position to co-teach, like you said, because I co-teach Mondays and Tuesdays, if you line it up, the classroom teacher could be doing the nonfiction reading on
mm-hmm.
that unit. So like my Iditarod unit, Spiro sleds, the classroom could be studying about Iditarod, and then I'm doing the robotics piece with them and doing that STEM challenge. You could plan it out that way. If you like have teachers who are on board or want to try it, you can connect with your STEM teacher that way. So if you're a classroom teacher, like, hey, let's connect. I would love to help plan. So if you're thinking about materials or what's in your room, that could be a cool way to manage it.
That would be. I mean, there's so many endless possibilities with this and cross curriculum, which I love. And one of the things that I'm going to kind of transition to in here is like, reason we're talking about this today is because we said it before, we're rolling out a PD program. And one of the first things we talk about in our PD program is the standards and how to
Yes.
approach them. So we're like super pumped to bring you this episode because this is just a little bit. You're
Yes.
just getting a taste of what this is going to be like. So if that is something you think you would be interested in, or even your school, reach out to us. And I mean, even if you want to reach out to us and you're like one of those people that you're like, well, I don't want to ask my principal, ask me to ask your principal. Ask your principal. I'm not scared to ask anyone a
Definitely.
good PD, because PD should be good. It shouldn't be bad. Right. So that is kind of what I wanted to transition to. Thank you so much for listening to this episode today, because we love creating it for you. We also wanted to tell you that if you have a teacher business and you make great resources, have a blog, and you really want to get your name out there, we are looking for partners to be part of our Innovative Teacher Corner. This is where we're going to highlight you in a 30-second or a minute reel in what you are doing and how you are standing out in the education world. If you are interested in collaborating with us in any other way with interviews, marketing opportunities, or want us to present at your school like we just talked about, you can email us at innovativeteacherpodcast@gmail.com. We already have one school booked up, and we want to take on some more, so you better hurry up because I feel like it's going to book up very fast in February. Make sure to subscribe to your favorite podcast, the Innovative Teacher Podcast, on all your major platforms. Make sure you follow us on social media. Thank you so much for listening today, Innovative Teachers. We will see you in the next episode.